Hello, everybody. Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. It is Thursday, March 18th, 2021 at 6:03 p.m. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the planning board. With me is Amelia Aboff, Sam Dixon, Jahan Habib, and Rob Buchanan. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general laws, chapter 38, section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020. This meeting of the planning board will be conducted via remote participation. We'll have an audio recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. We have a number of items on our agenda this evening. For anybody that is present tonight that was expecting to hear an opening of 120 Middlesex Avenue, that has been rescheduled and it will be opened on April 1st, 2021, so our next meeting after this. We will have a continuation of our discussion on 152 to 158 Broadway, which has previously been opened, and testimony has been taken on that, and testimony on that is now closed. We have two other items of other business, which is the Somerville zoning ordinance corrections and amendments, which is to a joint hearing that the planning board held with the land use committee a few weeks ago. And we also have discussion on a staff memorandum discussing the planning board's ability under Massachusetts law to hire consultants under general laws chapter 44 section 53G. What I'd like to do is invite Dan Bartman to be unmuted and to be able to make any sort of a presentation that he'd like on the amendments to the zoning ordinance. And then in the discretion of the chair, because Amelia has recused herself from a section of applications that is germane to Appendix A of one of those documents, she's going to recuse herself while this board deliberates on the Appendix A. Then once we have taken a vote on Appendix A, Amelia will return to us and we can move forward with future with the two other documents. So if Dan can be unmuted and just give a brief overview of what it is that we're handling tonight, I would appreciate it.
Good thing, Mr. Chair. Thanks for having me. I last met with the, so after the joint public hearing, we held a comment period open until Monday for both the Land Use Committee and the Planning Board, and we did not receive any formal written comments by email. Nothing had arrived in the mail by that point either. So we don't have any official comments. We have had some offline conversations with various people. So there are a small number of amendments or corrections to the language or additional text that we did add. And if you recall, there was a discussion about how to regulate recharging stations and electric vehicle charging stations. So there is some amended text based off of feedback from the director of the Office of Sustainability and Environment. The original proposal for a recharging station has now been adjusted to use the same terminology that is used in federal legislation to reference electric vehicles, which is a plug-in electric drive vehicle. Along with the charging equipment that is frequently used by the equivalent of a gas station, but for these plug-in electric drive vehicles, which is a DC fast charging, DCFC equipment. So a recharging station is the retail sales of electric energy for plug-in electric vehicles through DC fast charging equipment. And then there is, we also deleted the second Romanet that was proposed under that, so stipulations for when this is permitted. We delete recharging station principal uses are prohibited for surface parking lots. And then by the way, this is on page 6 of the PDF. And then the second item, electric vehicle charging station, that is an accessory structure. So all we do in that one is add to bring that in line with the federal terminology for electric vehicles, we add the words plug-in and drive before and after the word electric, so it is plug-in electric drive vehicles. That is the primary change to any language that resulted of any kind of feedback. There were a couple clarifications that the Land Use Committee did propose in what they recommended back out. I could review those, but they're like 2 words here and there. They are in your handout. If you wanted to check them, they're in blue text. It'll be annoying to verbally explain that. But if you have any questions about any of these the minor edits, the proposal is primarily exactly the same as originally submitted otherwise.
Dan, what I'm going to do is I do have a question or 2 about the document more broadly, but I'm going to hold off on that until after we've handled the Appendix A section of that document, so that Amelia can recuse herself for as briefly as possible, and then we can come back in to handle the remainder of that document.
Is it your intention, Mr. Chair, to switch over to that now?
Hang on, we lost Sam. He says he's having internet issues. He's being with the camera off and he's still on audio. If Sam could just unmute himself and confirm that he can still hear us.
I can, yes.
Okay, great. I just want to confirm that we will still have a sufficient number of members of the planning board to be able to move forward on the part of the document that Amelia is recusing herself from.
Okay, so I'm now recusing myself. Let me know when you'd like me to come back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, so we have the 4 of us and Dan. So Appendix A deals with master planned developments, which is right now Boynton Yards, right? Okay.
That's correct.
So the vote this board will take tonight is our recommendation to the Land Use Committee on whether to adopt these proposed changes. Does anybody, we're just dealing with the several papers that are listed under Appendix A of the November 2020 document. And for me, that's pages 7 through
14.
7 through 14 of that PDF. That's what I said. Does anybody have any comments or questions about the proposed changes in Appendix A such that we should discuss them now? Okay. Seeing none, the chair moves to recommend that the amendments listed in Appendix A be adopted by the Land Use Committee and by the City Council as a whole. Seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Okay, we have a unanimous recommendation to the Land Use Committee for adoption. Can we please bring Amelia back in? There we go. Okay. Yeah, and you can hear us now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so we can proceed with the remainder of that November 2020 document. And the question I have is a clarification for me and maybe for other members of the board, but I will speak for myself. And when we're talking about the recharging stations and that language, all we're doing tonight is recommending potentially approval for the Land Use Committee and the City Council to include a land use to be able to be applied for by a future applicant, right? We're not setting anybody up to stop constructing anything. We're not talking about where these should be located specifically, whether they can be located where they are, how many there can be, anything specific. All we're doing is laying a baseline and a use for someone to come in later to apply to do this, right?
Right. That's correct.
That's what I thought. I know this was the one that had received some discussion. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear on what it is that we would in fact be voting on tonight. The rest of it to me is pretty ministerial. But does anybody on board have any comments or questions on the remainder of that November document? Yes, Amelia.
To Dan, I was wondering if you could just expand on why the recharging station as a principal use being prohibited for surface parking lots was why that sort of second Romanet was struck in the revision between last week and this week.
So through the chair, that was the strictest version of recognizing that these things exist. Prior to some conversations that still needed to take place when this language was submitted. So we put out the most restrictive version, and then as those conversations happened, we backed off and figured out how do they fit in, what are the things we need to be concerned about, and had a number of meetings with Oliver's team, and he met with the city council and provided us with a lot of feedback that addressed some concerns that people had about how are these going to present themselves in Somerville, and if they do, are they a threat, or might they lock up land for a long period of time? And he was able to alleviate a lot of those concerns or address them in one form or another. So then we felt comfortable in backing off.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions on the November 2020 document? Okay, seeing none, the chair moves to recommend adoption of the remainder of the November 2020 amendments to the zoning ordinance, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Thank you all. We have a recommendation. We're going to take up next, and let me switch over documents so I can take a look at it, is the January 2021 proposed amendments to the ordinance. It's a two-page document. Dan, do you have anything that you'd like to address on this particular document? Is there anything to talk about of note?
This one has a clarification what we did in land use committee was to clarify the last item, number 6, under validity. There was a public comment at the hearing that the language was confusing. So we actually completely rewrote this one, which would read validity, Romanet I, a certificate of zoning compliance verifies only that proposed development is conforming to the Somerville zoning ordinance at the time it is issued. That is an errant word remains in the text, but so what that means is that really a certificate of zoning compliance and a building permit or a certificate of occupancy are applied for simultaneously. And the zoning compliance certificate verifies that the proposal is compliant with zoning, whereas the building permit or the C of O confirms that it's either compliant with building code or health code. So there's no document to say this complies with zoning. And so that's what the CZC was invented to be. It's not the replacement of a permit. It doesn't come with the same protections that frees the zoning ordinance of a special permit or a building permit. So we want to be abundantly clear with what it is. It's a piece of paper that verifies something at the time it is issued.
Great. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions on the January 2021 document? Seeing none, the chair is going to move to make one correction. It's to remove that errant word remains in section 6, just so we're all on board as to what it is that we've got moving forward. So the chair moves to recommend to the Land Use Committee adoption of this document as proposed, amended by me, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Dan votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Thank you very much. We have a unanimous recommendation. Dan, I think you are done with us tonight and can move on to your next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is, let me close out of this document. I've got too many documents open. I apologize. It's the memo. I'd like to, is Sarah still with us?
Yes, sir, I'm right here.
Sarah, I'd like to take up the matter of other business, which is your memo to us, which we just got a little while ago, which is your discussion of our abilities under General Laws Chapter 44. And I was hoping you might be able to provide a kind of a top level summary, because we just got this in. I understand that you're taking on the role of, not one, not two, but probably 3 or 4 people right now. And we just got this in a little while ago. So I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, to be frank. So you might be able to give us kind of a top level summary so that we can take it up once we've taken an opportunity to read it at our next meeting or the meeting thereafter. Because I'm not ready to have a discussion on this yet, to be honest.
Thank you very much. I was hoping you would say that. There's a lot of information that I wanted to convey, which is why I thought it would be easier to do in a memo to give you time to process it, and so we can discuss it at a later meeting. So I have actually, the first section goes into what the general law, the language of the general law itself. Knowing that we have some attorneys on the board, I thought that would be of interest. The shortest summary that I can think of is basically this statute allows the board to hire outside consultants that are paid for with a review fee that will be established. So a consultant will be basically employed by the board, but we, the planning staff, can manage that work for you to have specific reviews done. One of the first things that we have to do as part of this process is establish rules by which the statute can be used. So there is, did an initial draft of those rules that are also included in this memo. I do want to point out that this is a draft. And it has not yet been reviewed by the solicitor's office, which it would need to have done before any adoption or real consideration takes place. The other piece of this that rather than, so there's a couple of ways we can use consultants. So depending on the final scope of work related to any particular project, it can be following the city's normal procedure projects for hiring a consultant, or we do have in planning and zoning a number of on-call consultants that we use. One of which, one of the urban design firms that is on call actually has a former municipal planner on staff. Not here in Somerville, but somebody who's very familiar with reading zoning ordinances and checking for compliance. So, and that firm is willing to make this person available if we see fit, once we get a scope of work finalized they can then prepare a cost estimate. We can decide how to move forward from there. But as I said, we do have the opportunity to use the any city process at that point for hiring. That one just makes things a little simpler. And then the final piece in the memo is a draft scope of work. It's very much an outline at this point in time. So any and all recommendations and questions and comments are very welcome from the board as we zoom in on sort of tailoring sort of what the consultants might be and which projects may be applicable under this piece. So at this point in time, if you do have questions or comments, I do ask that you, if you email me, please do it individually so that we're not creating any open meeting law violations. And then I can bring those comments, consolidate them, and present them back to the board for discussion at our next, when we choose to take this up.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. Look forward to reading the memo and discussing it at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I'm gonna we're gonna move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Broadway project. And I'm sorry, I don't have the number right now, 152 to 158 Broadway.
Correct.
If I could, thank you. So if I could please have the applicant, the applicant's counsel be unmuted. The board would like to take up that application again.
This is Charlotte speaking. Rich DiGirolamo, you are unmuted. If you have anyone else you would like to unmute, just let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Rich DiGirolamo on behalf of the applicant. As you know, we appeared before you on two previous occasions, the first being on February 18th, in which we did a formal presentation of the project consisting of 45 units and roughly 4,500 square feet of commercial space, a net zero building with no parking. We then reappeared before your board on the 4th of March. And at that time, I think, Mr. Chairman, we primarily addressed a number of the design issues that your board had taken up and had concerns about at our February 18th meeting. If I'm not mistaken, I think, as far as I know, one of the only issues that remains is I know that you, Mr. Chairman, were somewhat concerned about getting a legal opinion from the law department relative to the establishment of precedents. And I have not heard, I did reach out on a couple of occasions, but I have not heard whether that opinion has been completed or in fact, if your board has.
Richard has. We received the opinion from the law department.
Great.
Earlier this week or last week. So
Okay,
yes,
great.
it has been issued to the board.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, obviously, we have the team present again tonight. Happy to answer any and all additional questions which any members might have.
Thank you very much. So the planning board has been emailed. I believe you have all received the opinion from the law department relative to this board's opinions and basically whether they hold precedent on other opinions, other decisions that we might make. And the answer broadly was no, with some important caveats. So that being the case, I don't know if anybody has any further discussion on that or on the application either to staff or to the applicant. But I will say that the opinion that was given to us by the solicitor's office was satisfactory to me. Move forward with this application as we have discussed it and as we have included proposed conditions. So I don't know if anybody would like to add further thoughts on that. Okay. So in order to move forward, or the best way to move forward, to be clear for the record, is we have, in order to, because the ordinance obviously changed, and it's totally new, and our responsibilities in moving forward with special permits like this require us to make certain findings, and Dan has sent us over kind of like what we did with Boynton Yards, a great little cheat sheet on a good methodology by which we can take this vote in order to address all of the requirements in the new ordinance. It used to just be we would vote to accept the staff recommendation as conditioned, and that would be great, and it was easy. It's a little bit more cumbersome right now under the new ordinance. So what we have to do is to discuss each one of the permits, so that there are three, each one of the special permits that are being requested by this applicant. And as a reminder, those are, I'm scrolling down. There is a special permit to establish a household living use. That's one. Another is a special permit for parking relief. And the third is a site plan approval for the 5-story net zero ready apartment building. So we need to take 3 votes. So we're all comfortable with what it is that we're required to do. So what I'd like to do is take up the first special permit first, which is the special permit to establish a household living use. So does the board have any conditions about the required conditions and considerations? And do you agree with the findings in the staff memorandum? Does anybody have any discussion on that? And would you like to change anything regarding the recommendations in the staff memorandum on that special permit? No? Okay. Does the board want to apply the staff recommended permit conditions? That's not a vote, that's something that you should consider before we take a vote. And whether there are any other conditions from board members relative to that particular special permit that's being requested by the applicant. Okay. Does the board have any discussion on any of those 3 questions that would address the required findings by this board? Okay. Then following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, the chair moves to approve with the conditions listed in the staff memorandum, the special permit to establish the household living use. Seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Dan votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Thank you all. We have a unanimous vote for that special permit. The next item to be voted on is the special permit for parking relief. And the staff memorandum incorporated a number of suggested conditions. This board discussed them. And so my questions for you all go back to whether you have any concerns about the required considerations, and do you agree with the findings in the staff memorandum? Do you want to apply the staff recommended permit conditions? And are there any other conditions that we would like to impose in regards to this special permit for parking relief?
Mr. Chair, if I may? I believe it was included in the staff memorandum, and I'm just referring back to it now. I believe this applicant had initially voluntarily proposed to prohibit any occupants of this building from eligibility for on-street residential parking permits, but I just want to be doubly sure that that does appear as a condition in addition to the voluntary requirement that was made, voluntary commitment that was made, and it appears that it does.
It is. It's in the staff memorandum, and the condition as suggested by staff says all buyers, grantees, lessees, renters, and tenants are prohibited from applying for on-street residential parking permits. So
Yep.
that to me, in addition, by the way, I'll just read all of those because it is something that's of concern. Broadway Investments Realty LLC shall submit a formal request to the Somerville Traffic Commission to be list of properties ineligible for on-street residential parking permits. If the above restriction is accepted by the Somerville Traffic Commission, this permit is subject to the following 3 standard permitting conditions applied by this board for all development ineligible for on-street residential parking permits, subject to the regulations of the Somerville Traffic Commission. And those are formal acknowledgement that residents are ineligible for on-street residential parking permits, subject to the regulations of the Somerville Traffic Commission, must be recorded with Middlesex South Registry of Deeds. The next one is that dwelling units must be advertised as ineligible for on-street residential parking permits, subject to the regulations of the Somerville Traffic Commission. The third is that all buyers, grantees, lessees, renters, and tenants must be notified in writing prior to sale or lease of any dwelling unit that the residents are ineligible for on-street residential parking permits, subject to the regulations of the Somerville Traffic Commission. So, so those are the proposed conditions listed in the staff memorandum. So those are the ones that we would basically vote to adopt if we were to move forward with a positive vote on this special permit. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this special permit? Okay. Seeing none, and following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, the chair moves to approve with the conditions that were listed, the special permit for parking relief, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Thank you all. We have that special permit. And the last one that we have to vote on is site plan approval for the 5-story net zero ready apartment building. So does anybody have, and the staff memorandum has a copious amount of conditions that we've discussed and you know, had discussion on by staff and by the applicant. So does anyone have any concerns about the considerations, and do you agree with the findings of the staff memo? Does anybody, do people want to apply the staff recommended permit conditions? And are there any additional conditions by board members for this site plan approval vote? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I believe in our previous discussion, we had mentioned maybe adding a condition about planning staff review of final facade materials for color selection. I don't believe that's covered by any of the existing conditions. I do recall that that was a request that was made by the design review committee, but I don't think that that has a enforceable provision to it. So I would propose adding it as a condition here as well.
I would be in support of adding that condition. Anybody have any comments or questions on Amelia's proposed condition being added? Amelia, would you like to have any further discussion?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any proposed conditions or comments or questions on this site plan approval? No? Okay, wonderful. Let me go back to my little cheat sheet. Following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions that both in the staff memorandum and as discussed this evening, the site plan approval for the 5-story net zero ready apartment building. Seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Thank you all. I believe those are all the permits that we need to vote on for this application. So I wish the applicant good luck.
Thank you very much, members of the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add for the good of the meeting? Do we still have Sarah on the line?
Yes, sir, I'm still here.
Okay, Sarah, I've got a question for you. It's something that you and I discussed on the phone earlier today, but I'd like to raise it with the board. There are a number of projects that have received permits from this board that are now quite old. That the projects are still not complete. They're kind of working at a snail's pace. And I'm wondering if you can investigate if there are ways by which this board can encourage those projects that are currently in the middle of construction to move forward at a speedier pace. And the two that you and I had discussed was the hotel building on Beacon Street and the residential building across from the Stop and Shop on McGrath Highway. Those were both issued by this planning board many, many years ago. It took several years for them to even get shovels on the ground, and they're still under construction.
I can certainly follow up with inspectional services and find out what the status of the permitting for those buildings are, just in case there are stop work orders or anything in place that we might not be aware of. And then find out if it would be something that falls under the purview of the building official, which is the director of ISD. So I can certainly follow up and find out sort of what recourse the board might have to edge those along a little.
Thank you. And this is not something that's new to this board, and those are just two that I discussed with you today. But this board periodically has had status updates on special permits and site plan approvals that we've issued in the past, where we've noted that no or slow action has been taken on them, and how we can move them forward. We've also asked in the past or whether the conditions that we have imposed on certain special permits are actually being followed. There were a few projects that we had imposed special permits on to materiality and certain other things that just weren't followed by the builder once they got the special permit from this board. And we asked to follow up on that through ISD, and I'm taking a solicitation now by members of the board. If there are special permits that we've imposed conditions on that you've got questions of staff on whether they've been met, or projects that haven't kind of moved forward with the speed and intent that we expected when we issued these permits, let the staff know, because this is something that when we grant special permits, we expect them to be used. And sometimes there are circumstances outside of our control and outside of their control. One project had to, they lost financing. One project, there was a change in owner, and sometimes it's just nice to know that. But with some, it's just they're taking their time, and that's not something that we like to see. So I'd ask any of you if you have any concerns about projects that you've seen around the city that you know that we've permitted, to take an eye on that and ask staff to follow up, because this is certainly something that we've done in the past. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
please feel free to email me. I would like to add that over the last couple of years, with the zoning review planners being added to inspectional services, making sure that the conditions are met on any special permit or any zoning relief request has become very well done, in as much as there's not much that slips through the cracks anymore. And so having those folks on board has really made a difference as far as conditions go. I will also add that if it is something minor that is not truly noticeable to anybody familiar with the project, as planning director, I do sign off on some of those minor de minimis changes. I am quite strict about that, to the chagrin of many applicants. So there are a couple of ways that we do make sure that conditions are met and things are caught. And so if it is not something that is minor, then it automatically will come back to the board for review and approval as a revision. The ones that have done that most recently have been ZBA cases. I don't think we've had come to the planning board, but that is part of our standard operation, has sort of become a little stricter, shall we say, about making sure the intent of the approvals are followed through on.
One that slipped through the cracks, and I think it's probably a little too late to fix it. I'm still peeved because it's probably the way we phrased it in the condition. I think Amelia knows which one I'm talking about. The intersection of Broadway and Temple Street. That one still gets me. That one still gets me because I'm virtually certain that the intent of this board was made clear in the discussion that we had with the applicant, with staff, and I don't think it properly translated the condition, and there might be an interpretation of that condition that says that they met the intent of the board, and it was not met. So I just want to make sure that if there's anything that you guys have seen around the city that you want to inquire about, we do have staff that's quite good at following up and making sure that our intent is preserved, because that's why we're here. Does anybody else have any comments or questions of staff, or any discussions from us? Great. Thank you all very much. We'll see you on April Fool's Day.
Thank you all. Motion to adjourn, please.
Absolutely. I always forget that one now. Chair moves to adjourn, second by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye. Rob votes aye.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.